All right, welcome. We are looking at 5 clawhammer banjo techniques ranked easiest to hardest. So these kind of range from fundamental techniques up to little embellishments you might not reach for that often, but can sound really cool. So I want to say, if you could use a little freshening up on your fundamentals, or if you are brand new to the banjo, check the description. I've got this free 90-minute video course to kind of teach you a first song. It's a great way to sort of lay that foundation you need in clawhammer banjo. And again, like I said, totally free. Go grab that. I think it'll be helpful for you. Okay. So technique number 1 is one of my favorites. I talk about it all the time. This is the M skip. The easiest way to think about the M skip really is, you're using your basic bum-ditty rhythm. And you're just skipping the brush stroke occasionally, right? The M skip then, if we're counting 1, 2, and 3, 4, and to do the M skip, you're just going to, on one of the brush strokes, so 1, or the brush stroke, so on 2, you're going to still hammer in. That clawhammer motion stays exactly the same. You hammer in, you dig your thumb into the 5th string, but you're just going to move your fingers past the strings without actually hitting them. So what that sounds like then is we're going to go from 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 2, 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, 2, and 3, 4, and same rhythm, same motion. We just move our fingers past the strings rather than actually striking them. And that can give you a lot of breathing room, make a song just feel like it has more space. You don't have that necessarily driving bum-ditty rhythm. You don't always want that. This is a way to take your foot off the gas a little bit, right? It also can sometimes make challenging pieces a little easier to play. So I think this is a great one to get the hang of. And let's look at how that might actually sound in a real song. So I'm just going to play the A part from Roscoe here. And now I'm going to just basically skip the brush strokes. I'm going to throw some M skips into here. I maybe went a little heavy on the M skips there, but you kind of get the idea that you can really make a banjo arrangement feel like it has a lot more space by skipping those occasionally. By the way, I'll put a link if you want the tab for Roscoe too. It is a really fun song. And I will also link a video up there if you want to dive deeper into M skips. All right, technique number 2 in our ranking, remember going easiest to hardest. This is the drop thumb. So I know a lot of people find drop thumb to be very intimidating. It feels like this sort of ultimate clawhammer banjo skill that maybe is pretty hard to acquire. And yes, it does take work. You are probably going to have to do some drilling here, but I can at least show you the way that I think about it that I think makes it a little simpler, at least in my mind. So we're going to start out with a basic bum-ditty rhythm between the 1st and the 5th string. So just 1, 2, and 3, 4, and say we want to throw a little drop thumb in there, we might do something like this. Right? So our clawhammer motion stays exactly the same. We're still just going that on the beat. Every downbeat, we drive our hand towards the banjo. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and you should, in my opinion, people do differ, but I think that you should be digging your thumb into the 5th string on every beat. That is a fantastic skill to develop. So whether you're going to sound the 5th string or not, I really like to sink my thumb on every banjo stroke here into the 5th string. And I've actually got a whole video on this. I will also link if you want to kind of dive deeper a little bit into thumb technique. But just know, sink your thumb into the 5th. You should be able to see it actually intersecting the string here, right? If you do that, that's going to make the drop thumb a lot easier, because then all you're going to do for the drop thumb is you're just going to move your thumb to a different string. So you're going to keep your hand position the same and say I want to do a drop thumb on the 2nd string. When I bring my hand back, I'm just moving my thumb closer to my index finger or whatever striking finger you use, right? And then when I come down, I'm just sinking my thumb into that 2nd string instead of the 5th string. So it really feels the same to me. I'm just adjusting the position of my thumb a little bit. And with some drilling, a little bit of daily practice, you don't have to go crazy. You don't want to have to run yourself ragged just to acquire a new banjo skill. To me, that makes it less fun, right? Let's spend a few minutes at the start of each session practicing. And the nice thing is that kind of sets your intention for the rest of your session, right? You'll be paying a little more attention to it. So I think that can be really useful. And a good way to start to practice hammer-ons if you're, reading through tabs or whatever else to learn songs, look for melody notes that appear on descending consecutive strings. So like maybe, an open first to an open second. And then that is usually a great spot to add a drop thumb. So if you see like maybe the part goes 1, 2, and 3, 4, and could you do something like 1 and 2 and 3, 4, and right? Something simple like that. And that'll give you sort of more spots to practice if you're just starting to learn from simple tabs. All right, so technique number 3, where we're going easiest to hardest. So I guess this is sort of the halfway point. It's not exactly a technique. It's more of a rhythm device. And I'm talking about the triplet. The triplet can be a great embellishment for a song, but it can also be very confusing because it sort of changes the way you count the beat. So without the triplet, this little piece might sound something like this. But maybe I'm doing this little pull off here. What if I wanted to turn that into a triplet? So it might sound like this. Actually, I think that sounds really cool, but it does kind of change your rhythm a little bit. So let's talk about how we normally count and how we count triplets. So normally when we count, we're going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, right? So 4 beats, each beat gets divided into 2 equal parts. That's your 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Well, when we play a triplet, we're dividing the beat into 3 equal parts, and that can be a little confusing. So instead of 1 and 2 and, we're going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So it sort of requires a slightly different way of thinking, especially if you want to switch back and forth between the two, which is what we're doing here on our little. So up until the triplet, we're dividing each beat into 2 pieces. Then we divide the beat into 3 pieces for the triplet, and then we're back to 2. And that can be a little confusing to count. So the best way I would say to start with this is to actually just count it. Like clap your hands, use a metronome. So maybe I put on the metronome, go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and literally count out loud like that until you get used to feeling sort of switching between the two, and that'll really help. But once you do that, maybe just try some simple exercises. All I'm doing here for this triplet is I'm striking with my index finger, and then I'm doing a hammer-on pull-off. So 1 and so a good practice exercise might be to do something like 1, 2, and 3. Practice that with a metronome, sort of make sure it is lining up correctly, and you'll be good to go. And then when you encounter that in the future, you'll be able to play it, or you can sort of add it into tabs. I personally think it sounds better in like slower pieces a little bit. I feel like it can get a little muddy, like you're cramming too much into there in faster songs, but in slower pieces, it can sound really nice. All right, technique number 4, we're looking at the alternate string pull-off. Okay, the reason this is number 4, so our second hardest technique we're looking at today, is just because it requires a bit of coordination between your right and your left hands. So I'm going to demonstrate real quick, and then we'll talk about how this works. So it'd be something like this. You see, we get kind of that cool, very fast, almost like a bluegrass feel. At least, sort of those breakneck speeds sometimes we see in bluegrass, and that can be really fun. But it requires a bit of coordination between your right and your left hands that we don't necessarily have in other techniques. So what we're doing here, and I've seen this called an anticipation technique, which I think is a good way of thinking about it. So I'm striking the open third string here, and as I'm doing that, I am setting my middle finger, I'm fretting the second fret of the first string with my middle finger, right? On the end of that beat, then I'm just going to pull off that first string. So 1 and my right hand's not doing anything on that beat. And then we continue our basic clawhammer stroke by hitting the first string, thumb pluck. So it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And what I want you to think about is fretting the note you're going to pull off from. At the same time, you're striking a different string. That'll make it a lot easier, I think. 1 and 2 and. You see my middle finger and my striking finger are sort of coordinated here. And I think that will make it much simpler. I'm not trying to like hit and then fret. I would get too confused with that. This way I kind of stay on the beat with both my hands. And this can be a really great way to add a little variety. Like sometimes, you play a song, you're just kind of hanging out on a bum-ditty, like maybe at the end of a phrase, right? Well, maybe you can change to a little alternate string pull-off pattern. That can sound really cool. Don't think that it's always going to be the first string, second fret. Like you can do these anywhere. You can pull off to a fretted note even, or different strings or whatever. So practice this in a bunch of different ways, and then you'll definitely see places you can add these into songs to make them a little more exciting. By the way, I also want to mention I have a Patreon now. So if you want sort of more detailed lessons where we go over specific songs in great detail over a few weeks, we do some live sessions over there. I'll put a link in the description for that as well. That might be of interest to you. All right, technique number 5, the Galax lick or the arpeggio. I find these to be very difficult to play because I feel like they mess with my natural rhythm. However, they can sound really cool. Let's see what a Galax lick looks like, and then we'll break it down. So it's that. So I think the reason the Galax lick is hard to pull off is because it kind of messes with that natural clawhammer motion, where basically you're keeping your hand down for a full beat instead of that half beat you normally have. You're sort of normally going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and so your hand is coming back up on the 1. With the Galax lick, you're actually keeping it down for a whole beat before you pull up, and then you're pulling back up on the start of the next beat, which is why I don't love using these. However, in some songs, they just sound too good to pass up. And Cuckoo, the Cuckoo Bird that I was just playing, is a perfect example of that. If you watch the Clarence Ashley version, he uses the Galax lick beautifully in that. And it's really hard to, I want to play it. So, so sometimes, you got to learn these techniques that maybe aren't your daily go-tos. So the way to think about this is when you are hammering in, you're going to strike a string, maybe say start with the 4th string. You can start this anywhere, and then you're just going to run your striking finger across the strings up, and then pluck off with your thumb at the end. So which string you start on determines how many sub beats you're dividing your beat into. So if I start on the 4th string, well, I've got 4 strings to go, so I'm going to divide the beat into 4 beats. So I'm going to go 1, E, and 2, right? If I start on the 3rd string, which is probably a little more common, I'm going to go 1 and 2. 2nd string would just be 1 and 2. And all you're doing is you're just, in a controlled way, even beats, you're moving your index finger or your striking finger across the strings. You're just opening it up across the strings. And so I like to think of actually coming to rest with the back of my fingernail on each string, and then sort of plucking it deliberately. So 1, E, and after you pluck the 1st string, now you pluck the 5th string, and that's going to be the downbeat of the next note. So 1 and 2, 1 and 2, 1 and 2, 1 and 2, 1 E and 2, 1 E and 2. Doesn't have to be 100% exact. We're banjo players, not rocket scientists, but it's going to sound better the more even you can get it. So this is one that you want to just kind of practice with a metronome, get it as evenly as possible. Eventually you'll build up to that cool Clarence Ashley, I think that can sound really good when pulled off well. Okay, so that's going to do it. See you next week. I'm going to have a new puppy next week, so that's exciting. Maybe she will make an appearance on the video. We'll see. All right, see you then. Bye-bye.